Let's go to global matters and the issues in the Middle East. The UN's Human Rights Office condemning a targeted Israeli attack that killed 6 journalists in Gaza, calling it a breach of international law. 5 Al-Jazeera journalists, including correspondent Anas Al-Sharif, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on Sunday. 2 others were killed, including a freelance journalist, the broadcaster has claimed. Now, Israel has received worldwide condemnation after this. The bombing was near Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital. Israel still says they have evidence that Al-Sharif was an active terrorist within Hamas. In an interview to Sky News yesterday, Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, a spokesperson for the IDF, was asked about the validity of that evidence.
There's many types of intelligence that the IDF has about what's happening in Gaza. One of them, what we showed to the public, are papers that our forces were able to find in different locations within Gaza. Those are easy to declassify, relatively easy. There are more complex, more delicate intelligence that we have to treat very carefully, because intelligence that you declassify, if you do it in an uncareful manner, you can't use it the next time. And we know in real time, in the time of the strike, that he was an active terrorist in Hamas. He was, in addition to intelligence, we have of things he was doing and conducting. We also have intelligence of the fact that he was on a Hamas payroll while he was on an Al-Jazeera payroll.
Now, speaking with LBC yesterday, Louise Allion-Bichet, who's a reporter Sans Frontières, said this was clearly a targeted attack to stop journalists operating in Gaza.
It's very clear. It's another attack against journalists and this type of deliberated attack have been going on for almost 2 years now. And the goal is quite clear. Again, the tactic is known. And to us as Reporters Without Borders, the goal is clearly to have a complete information and media blackout of what is happening now in the Gaza Strip.
I'm acutely aware this story has been bouncing around for a few days, but it's been given fresh impetus yesterday by the Palestinian delegation to the United Nations. And here is the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, in New York at a Security Council meeting, calling for more journalists to go to Gaza.
You need to send large delegations of journalists to go to the Gaza Strip to see with your own eyes the reality of our people and the crimes committed by Israel, and to report back on it. We do not trust the reporting of the Israeli occupying authorities about the reality in the Gaza Strip.
Let's bring into the conversation Ruth Wasserman Lande, who has served as a member of parliament in Israel and is an expert in Arab affairs. When you see the defence being put forward by Israel for the actions regarding the journalists, how do you respond? Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on your platform.
Not at all.
Very, very clearly, there are and there have been journalists, so-called journalists in inverted commas, not all of them, but definitely those that have been killed, working for Al-Jazeera and actually accompanying those nukhbas, or the terrorists that went in on October 7th and documented themselves. There were so-called journalists accompanying them and actually live streaming all the atrocities and horrors, including opening the belly of a pregnant woman, and all of those things that were then put on Telegram and other social media platforms. Also, there were journalists who...
I wonder if we can restrict ourselves to those 5 from Al Jazeera. What evidence do you have that satisfies you that this was a valid action by the IDF?
So the IDF, as the spokesperson said, has indicated clearly that some things could be declassified, and they were declassified, and there were pictures provided, by the way, they're completely public, of the specific journalist, Anas, who was documented himself in Hamas uniform
but how
with
recent
weapons.
Was that, Ms. Wasserman Lande? How recent was that?
No, very recent. The guy is a very young man in the territory, in Gaza and elsewhere. It was not years ago. This is very recent.
Well, the tracking document that's been put out dates back to 2023. But even if we allow that this gentleman was in some way working for Hamas, what of those who were with him?
It's not in some way, sir. I would like to stress, these are men who work for Al-Jazeera. Al-Jazeera...
Are you telling me that all 5 of them, in your view, were Hamas operatives?
I don't know that, and I cannot give you that answer. I can tell you that Anas specifically...
So I appreciate your candor, thank you. So if you don't know...
You're welcome.
How can you possibly sanction the murder of what possibly 4 innocent journalists, allowing that you believe Anas Al-Sharif to be a Hamas operative?
So first of all, Anas was killed not in a targeted manner and not because he is a so-called journalist, and I say this in inverted commas, but because he is a Hamas operative. I don't know regarding the rest.
But how can you justify that? I appreciate it wasn't your action. I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful that you come in as a former member of Knesset. But how can you justify 4 innocent journalists? Or I think one of them was a field producer. So go ahead.
I'm trying to answer. I can, and I do have the information that the Israeli policy, as opposed to what that French journalist said prior to my speaking, is absolutely not to target innocent civilians and or journalists. And any and all evidence that needs to be declassified to show that not only Anas, but the other 4 are not innocent civilians will be provided. There is no policy by the Israeli IDF and or government to target journalists. This is not something that we do. On the contrary, we are convinced...
But why is it then that figures from the 2 organisations, Independent Freedom Journalists and the CPJ, says that 274 journalists have been killed in various operations in Gaza, 269 of them are Palestinian? How can you possibly say the IDF isn't killing journalists?
Because the IDF is killing operatives that work for the Hamas.
All 274 now, are they? They're all Hamas.
The Hamas... it's a pity that you are laughing because I'm
not laughing. I just find I say to you, I find it risible that you want my listeners to believe of the 274 journalists who've died since the 11th of August 2025, numbers certified by 2 separate organisations, respectfully, 269 of them of whom were Palestinian. You want my listeners to believe they were all journalists. That's what I find risible.
So respectfully, sir, if I may finish a full sentence,
Please.
perhaps I will allow your listeners to have a little bit more information.
Please.
The Palestinian Gazans who have been hired by Al-Jazeera to be so-called journalists, by the way, not a few of them had actually taken hostages and tortured our hostages. And this has been a proven point told by hostages that have been given back in agreed upon agreements with the Hamas. So those so-called journalists have been in Gaza, young people, they've been in the indoctrinating process of Hamas for the past 20 years. They have been so-called covering the so-called horrors of Israel and accompanying Hamas operatives all along.
All right, all 274 then, you believe, lastly?
First of all, 274 is a number that has been given by whom?
By whom? By the 2 separate organisations, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists and the Independent Freedom of Journalists organisation, so both journalists' bodies.
Okay, so those journalist bodies...
They're lying as well,
give
are they,
the
Ruth?
names, if they... Why are you putting words in my mouth, may I ask? Did I say that?
Because you've disputed every single figure that's been put forward.
I've not disputed. I am saying
you disputed
a fact,
Reporters Sans Frontières. I would imagine you will dispute these 2 so that's 3 separate organisations that put these figures out, Ruth.
I have not disputed. What I'm saying is very simple.
Right.
The Hamas and organizations are saying that Israel is targeting journalists. I am telling you, Israel is not targeting journalists. What is happening is that Israel is targeting Hamas operatives that are killing our people, and by the way, killing Palestinians as well, on a daily basis, by the way.
I'm grateful for your time. Thank you. I must leave it there. Thank you for your time. Ruth Wasaman Lande is a former member of the Israeli Knesset and is an expert in Arab affairs. Well, let's turn now to a broadcaster and campaigner who has posted messages concerning the Middle East conflict and also has concerns over the treatment of journalists. Nicola Thorp, who I've worked with in many TV studios down the years. Good to see you again, Nicola. Hopefully you heard most of what that former Israeli MP or member of the Knesset was saying. Your reaction to that and to the Palestinian delegation saying, let's get more journalists in. Morning, Nicola.
Good morning, Nick. Yeah, unfortunately, I did listen to your previous guest. I mean, I find it outstanding that she would say that Israel doesn't target journalists, just as Israel doesn't target hospitals and Israel doesn't target children. And you said yourself, you know, what possible justification can there be for killing these four other innocent people who were in that tent with Anas? Well, I'm afraid, you know, that Israel have managed to justify the killing of 16,000 children and counting so far. Yes, I do think international journalists should be allowed into Gaza. Why should Israel be so fearful of journalism, so fearful of the truth? We saw the journalists accompanying aid drops last week and the week before, and even those journalists were being told not to film outside the windows. Why on earth would Israel not want us to know what they are doing in Gaza? And as a British taxpayer, I want to know where my tax is being paid on, and what on earth our government are doing, because currently the government are still supplying weapons to Israel and F-35 parts to the global market that could be used in Gaza. They are also providing intelligence flights over Gaza, and I want to know, I want journalists on the ground to tell me what my money is being spent on. But the thing is, Nick, we've had journalists on the ground this whole time. They've been local Palestinian journalists. But unfortunately, the second they're critical of Israel, they're accused of being Hamas members.
Should we be hearing more from the British Foreign Secretary, the British Prime Minister, or others in your view, Nicola?
Yes, constantly. What we've seen here, the killing of Anas, is a clear and apparent war crime, on top of all the other war crimes that we've seen over the past 2 years, Nick. I think people like myself, I speak as somebody who works in broadcast, but also just as a citizen, I see daily these images of children, innocent people being blown to pieces, an entire land being destroyed. And I feel so strongly that our government, as allies with this nation, should be doing far more than it currently is.